I will never forget the night I realized my marriage was no longer mine to save. Not because of infidelity, not even because of years of unhappiness. No, this was something different. It all began with a single request, one sentence. Kyle needs to start paying rent. That was it. And yet, that one sentence sparked a storm that had clearly been building for a long time. My name is Jason Miller. I am 41 years old, born and raised in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I work as a regional operations manager for a manufacturing firm, stable job, decent pay, long hours. Nothing flashy, just honest work. I thought my life was in a good place. I had a house I was proud of, a marriage that I believed in, and a sense of control over the world I built. I was wrong. 16 months earlier, Tina, my wife, opened our front door to her younger brother Kyle after his girlfriend kicked him out. At first, I did not protest. Families go through rough patches, and I believed in being supportive. I was raised that way. Tina told me it would just be a few weeks until he got his life sorted. Kyle was 30, had no job, no savings, and 1,000 excuses, but I gave him a chance. I cleared out the guest room, helped him move his stuff in, even offered to help him find some work through my network. I was raised to believe that lending a hand does not make you weak, but staying silent while someone walks all over you does. And I stayed silent for too long. The first few weeks were tolerable, but by the third month, Kyle was still sleeping in until noon, leaving empty beer cans on the coffee table and blasting video games at full volume while I was working. He never lifted a finger around the house, never contributed a cent, and somehow always had new sneakers or some expensive gadget. Tina would defend him at every turn. He's going through a lot, Jason. He just needs time. You're being too harsh. I felt like I was living with two people who had drawn a line, and I was standing alone on the other side of it. What stung the most was not Kyle's laziness, but Tina's refusal to even acknowledge how uncomfortable things had become. Like I was the villain for wanting respect in my own home. I began to notice small things. My groceries disappearing overnight, my shampoo being used up twice as fast, my Amazon account showing orders I never placed. I confronted Tina gently, cautiously, because I did not want to create a fight. She brushed me off every time. "You're being dramatic," she said. "Kyle would never do that." But I knew what I saw. I knew what I felt. My home was no longer a sanctuary. It was a battleground. And I was losing. So when I finally said those words, "Kyle needs to start paying rent," I expected some pushback. What I did not expect was for Tina to explode. She screamed at me in a tone I had never heard from her before, like I had insulted her personally, like I had crossed some sacred line I did not even know existed. I sat there stunned, while the woman I had loved for nearly a decade chose her brother over her husband. In that moment, something inside me broke, not in rage, not even in sorrow, but in quiet, bitter clarity. I realized I had let things go on for too long. That storm I had felt building, it was not coming. It was already here. It was a cold, gray Thursday when Kyle showed up with a beat-up duffel bag and a story full of half-truths. Tina opened the door before I even knew he had arrived. She hugged him like he had just come back from war. I stood behind her in the hallway, unsure whether to shake his hand or ask him what his plan was. Tina turned to me with a smile and said, "Just a couple of weeks, Jason. He needs time to get his head straight." I nodded. I did not want to start anything in front of him, and honestly, I believed her. He was her younger brother. He had just been dumped, was unemployed, and needed help. What kind of man would I be if I said no to that? The first few days were quiet. Kyle kept to himself, slept late, and mostly stayed in the guest room. I figured he was still adjusting. I even brought him a few meals, tried to make him feel welcome. But after the first week, patterns began to emerge. He slept until noon, came downstairs in boxers, and left his dishes wherever he finished eating. The fridge started to empty faster. I would come home from work and find the living room covered in snack wrappers, game controllers, and that lazy stench that comes from someone who had not showered in 2 days. He never once offered to help with anything. Dishes, laundry, groceries, nothing. It was like living with a teenager who had no curfew, no job, and no shame. Tina refused to see the problem. Any time I tried to talk to her about it, she would roll her eyes or change the subject. "Jason, he is going through something," she said. "You are just being uptight." I wanted to believe her, but it felt like she was making excuses for a grown man who had no intention of moving forward. Weeks turned into months, and Kyle was still on the couch, scrolling on his phone, eating food I paid for, and playing video games all night like it was some frat house vacation. He laughed louder than anyone should at 2 a.m. and had zero awareness of how much tension he was causing in my own home. One evening, I came back from work to find Kyle sprawled out on the couch with a pizza box on his chest and my dog locked out of the house. Tina was at yoga class, and the entire house smelled like garlic and beer. I asked Kyle if he could clean up. He looked up at me like I'd just insulted his entire bloodline and muttered, "Relax, man, I'll get to it." He never did. I cleaned up the mess myself while he resumed his game without another word. That was the first time I felt genuine resentment toward him. Not dislike, not frustration, resentment. I had welcomed him into my house, and he had made it his own without earning an inch of it. Still, I held my tongue. I told myself things would get better, that he would get a job, save some money, and move out. But deep down, I knew better. Kyle had no reason to leave. He was getting a free ride, food, power, shelter, all on my dime, and with Tina's full approval. I had started to feel like a guest in my own home, walking on eggshells around someone who contributed nothing and expected everything. And worst of all, I knew that saying anything would make me the bad guy. So I stayed quiet, all while the weight of Kyle's presence kept growing heavier with every passing day. It started with the electric bill. 1 month it jumped by $40, the next it nearly doubled. At first, I thought maybe I had left the porch lights on or the heat too high, but deep down I knew the real reason. Kyle was home all day, every day. The TV ran for hours, lights left on in every room, and that PlayStation of his never seemed to sleep. I once came home early and found 3 space heaters blasting in different rooms, while Kyle sat shirtless on the couch, eating chips like he was on spring break. I pointed it out, but he just shrugged and said, "It's been cold lately." Cold for who? He was living like a king while I worked 10-hour shifts just to keep the lights on. Then came the groceries. We used to make 1 weekly trip to the store. Now it felt like I was at the market every 3 days. Bread, eggs, snacks, frozen meals, gone by the end of the day. At first I thought maybe Tina was cooking more, but no, it was Kyle. He had the appetite of a teenage athlete with the lifestyle of a couch potato. I bought a pack of steaks for a weekend dinner and came home to find the empty tray in the trash, with Kyle licking barbecue sauce off his fingers. When I asked what happened, he grinned and said, "Hope you do not mind." I was starving. I did mind. I minded a lot. But Tina stood behind him, arms crossed, silent. Money started slipping through my fingers like water. I picked up more overtime, stayed late at the office, started skipping lunch just to stretch our account. But no matter how much I worked, the expenses piled higher. I never saw Kyle look for work, not once. No applications, no interviews, not even a passing mention of a plan. And Tina, she defended him like it was her job. "He just needs space to heal," she would say. "He is not ready yet." But healing does not look like lounging on my sofa and ordering $40 sushi on a Tuesday night. Healing does not come with extra soy sauce and a side of guilt for the guy paying for it. One night I got an alert on my credit card, a food delivery for nearly $50. I had not ordered anything. Tina was out with friends. I opened the front door and found Kyle taking the bag from the delivery driver, laughing and thanking him like he had earned it. I asked him if he used my card. He looked confused and said, "Tina gave it to me, said it was fine." I checked later. She had shared our joint card information with him. No warning, no permission. Just handed it over like it meant nothing. That was when it hit me. Not only was I being disrespected, but my trust was being quietly drained just like my bank account. I was not just paying for an extra mouth in the house. I was paying for someone else's laziness, entitlement, and complete disregard for my work and my worth. And worst of all, I was paying for Tina's silence, her unwillingness to say no, her refusal to see how much it was crushing me. The bills kept rising, but what really hurt was that the respect, the simple human decency I expected in my own home, was falling faster than any dollar amount. I knew I could not stay quiet forever. The resentment was building, and no matter how much I tried to bury it, it started bleeding into everything. One night, after another long day at work and another delivery charge I did not make, I finally brought it up to Tina. I waited until Kyle was out, tried to stay calm, and laid everything out. How the bills had doubled, how Kyle never helped, how I felt like a stranger in my own home. Tina just stared at me. Her face, usually warm and expressive, went cold like marble. She crossed her arms and said, "You are being too harsh. He is family. He is going through something. You need to be more understanding." I stood there, stunned. I had expected a little pushback, sure, but not that. Not complete dismissal. I was not shouting. I was not demanding anything unreasonable. I just wanted fairness. I wanted acknowledgement. But instead I felt like a villain for speaking up. That night we barely spoke. We got into bed with a full arm's width between us. No goodnight, no apology, just silence thick enough to suffocate. That was the moment I realized there was now a divide between us, a quiet, invisible crack that neither of us was willing to address. A few days later, I decided to talk to Kyle directly, man to man. I caught him in the kitchen heating up leftovers I had made, and asked him if we could talk. I told him straight. I said, "Listen, I have no problem helping you out, but this cannot go on forever. It has been months. I am asking you to start contributing. Even just a small amount each month would help." Kyle paused, chewing slowly, then nodded like he understood. "Yeah, man, totally. I get it. I'll start tossing in something next month." He smiled, gave me a half-hearted pat on the shoulder, and walked off. That was 5 months ago. Since then, nothing changed. Not $1, not one chore. If anything, he got bolder, more comfortable, like he had won some silent battle I never agreed to fight. Tina never brought it up again, and I stopped trying. Every time I looked at her, I wanted to say something, but the words stuck in my throat. I felt like anything I said would just be thrown back at me. "You are overreacting. It is not that bad. Why do you hate my brother?" I did not hate Kyle. I hated what his presence was doing to us. I hated that my wife could not see how far we had drifted. The house got quieter, not because we argued, but because we stopped communicating. I started staying at work longer, took the long way home, found excuses to run errands just so I would not have to walk into that tension, and every time I did come home, Kyle was there, laughing, gaming, eating, and Tina was curled up beside him like this was normal, like I was the outsider. That silence between us, it was no longer just quiet, it had become a wall, and behind that wall, I felt myself fading out of my own life. I was sitting in the parking lot outside work one evening, waiting for a late meeting to start, when I got a notification from our credit card app. It said a charge had just gone through, $47 at some burger joint across town. The timing made no sense. Tina was at her yoga class, and I certainly had not ordered anything. I clicked into the app and started scrolling through the history, something I had not done in a while, and that was when it all hit me. There were charges I did not recognize going back weeks, takeout from restaurants I had never eaten at, gas stations on the other side of the city, a recurring charge for something called Game World Monthly. It was all under my name, using my saved card, and I knew exactly who was behind it. I waited until I got home to say anything. Kyle was on the couch, headphones on, laughing at something on his screen. Tina was in the kitchen, heating up leftovers. I pulled her aside and showed her the app. I asked, "Do you know anything about these charges?" She barely glanced at the phone before saying, "Oh, Kyle probably thought it was my card. Must have been a mix-up." A mix-up? That was the word she used? Like it was an innocent accident. Like her brother had not been using my money for weeks without permission. I stood there, stunned. I asked her if she had given him access to our account. She just shrugged and said, "I might have. A while ago, but I thought it was for emergencies." Emergency? Since when is a monthly video game subscription or a late-night milkshake run considered an emergency? I felt the heat rising in my chest, not from the money, though that hurt, but from the fact that my wife was dismissing it so casually. I worked hard. I woke up early. I stayed late. I skipped lunch just to save a few dollars here and there. And here was Kyle, blowing my money without even the decency to ask, and Tina acting like I was overreacting for being upset. I wanted to confront Kyle right then and there, but I stopped myself. I knew it would go nowhere. He would say he thought it was hers. She would defend him. I would end up looking like the bad guy again. So instead, I sat down at the dining table and quietly opened my laptop. I removed all saved payment methods, changed my passwords, and made sure our joint account had a spending limit. It was the smallest act of control I could take, back in a house that no longer felt like mine. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling for hours. Tina was already asleep beside me, completely at peace, like nothing had happened. But for me, something had. A line had been crossed, not just with money, but with trust. I realized that in her eyes, my comfort and security meant less than her brother's convenience. And once someone crosses that line, no matter how quietly, something changes, something breaks. And once it breaks, it does not go back to the way it was. It was a Thursday evening when I walked through the front door and felt something shift inside me for good. The lights were off in the hallway, the air was stale, and the house had that lived-in but uncared-for feel that made my chest tighten. I set my keys down, slipped off my shoes, and turned into the living room. And that was when I saw it. A pile of my work clothes, wrinkled and carelessly tossed, sitting right on the couch like trash someone had forgotten to throw out. My suits, shirts, ties, all of it, folded over themselves in a mess that said loud and clear, "You do not belong here." I stood frozen for a minute, staring at the pile. I walked over slowly, picked up one of my shirts, and turned to face the hallway. I called out for Tina. She came around the corner, holding her phone, calm as ever. I asked, "What is this?" She looked at the clothes and casually said, "I needed to make more room in the closet. Kyle's stuff did not fit, and yours was kind of taking up space." Just like that. No apology, no explanation, no sign that she even realized how deep that cut. I asked her, "So you gave him my side of the closet?" She nodded like it was the most logical thing in the world. He needed somewhere to hang his jackets. You have the guest room now. It is not a big deal. But it was a big deal. It was more than a pile of clothes. It was a message, a reminder that my place in this home, in this marriage, had quietly been moved to second place. I had already been sleeping in the guest room for weeks. That had started as a temporary arrangement. At least that was what she said. Just until Kyle finds his rhythm, she told me. But now even my clothes had been exiled. My space, my comfort, even my dignity had been handed over without a single conversation. I carried my clothes down the hall and dropped them on the bed in the guest room. I sat there for a long time, staring at the floor. It was not about the closet. It was not even about Kyle anymore. It was about the person I married, the woman who used to stand beside me, who used to listen, who used to care. That woman was gone, and in her place was someone who saw my sacrifices as obstacles, my voice as noise, and my presence as optional. That night, I did not sleep much. I lay in the guest bed with my old comforter pulled up to my chin, and I tried to remember the last time Tina and I had a real conversation that did not involve Kyle. I could not. Somewhere along the line, I had been replaced, slowly, silently, without warning. And that pile of clothes on the couch? That was the proof. Not just that I was no longer the priority, but that I had become an afterthought. A husband pushed aside so her brother could take my place. I do not know what pushed me over the edge. Maybe it was the closet. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was that growing sense of betrayal that never left my chest. But one night, after another long shift, and another awkward dinner with Tina and Kyle chatting like I was not even there, I opened my laptop and logged into our joint bank account. I told myself I was just checking bills, but deep down, I was looking for something. Answers. Clarity. Proof that I was not going crazy. And what I found hit harder than I was ready for. It started with a transfer for $50, then $70, then $120. All labeled things like MISC, personal, or just left blank. The date stretched back months. Then I saw another one, a $200 withdrawal marked cash gift. I clicked through each line, one by one, my heart sinking deeper with every scroll. When I added them all up, it came to just over $6,000. $6,000, slowly siphoned out of our savings, little by little, like a quiet leak under the floorboards. And all of it went to Kyle. The betrayal was not just the money. It was the secrecy, the deception. Tina had made these transfers behind my back for an entire year. While I was pulling extra shifts, skipping out on things I wanted, saying no to vacations and dinners out so we could stay on budget, she was handing over our savings to a grown man who played video games all day. I sat there, staring at the screen, trying to make sense of it. I thought about all the times she told me we could not afford something. All the times she guilted me into doing more, working more, sacrificing more. And all the while, she was quietly funding her brother's lifestyle like he was her second husband. I got up, walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and just stood there. I was not even angry yet. I was stunned. Betrayal has a way of freezing you in place before it burns. My mind was racing, but my body was stuck. It was not just the lies. It was what the lies said about where I stood in this marriage. I was the provider, the husband, the man who showed up. But I had no say, no voice, no respect, and now no trust. I could not bring myself to confront her that night, not yet. I needed time. I needed to decide what this meant for me, what it meant for us. But I knew one thing for certain. This was not just about Kyle anymore. This was about Tina. This was about the choices she made in secret. And the truth, once seen, cannot be unseen. I had found the crack beneath everything we built, and now I had to decide if I was willing to keep living on a foundation that was already broken. By the end of that week, I could not carry it any longer. The weight of everything, my clothes on the couch, my savings drained behind my back, my marriage crumbling while I pretended to be okay, it had finally reached its limit. I needed to say it out loud. I needed to speak the truth, not just to myself but to Tina. So I waited until the next morning. I knew she would be at work and easier to talk to without Kyle hovering in the background. I sat at the dining table, took a deep breath, and dialed her number. When she picked up, I kept my voice steady. I told her I had looked through the bank records. I told her I saw the transfers. I told her I knew she had been giving Kyle money for over a year. I was not angry. I did not raise my voice. I just laid it all out, the facts, the betrayal, and the way I felt like a guest in my own home. There was a long pause on the other end. Then Tina's tone changed. It was sharp, cold, defensive. She accused me of invading her privacy, said I had no right to go through our finances without asking her first. I reminded her it was a joint account, that it was our money. She did not care. She told me I was controlling, that I never liked Kyle, and I was just using this as an excuse to get rid of him. I told her this was not about Kyle anymore. It was about us, about how she made decisions without me, gave away money behind my back, and ignored me every time I tried to talk. She said Kyle was family. I said, so am I. She hung up without another word. That night she came home furious. She slammed the door, dropped her bag, and launched into a rant before I could even get a word out. Every sentence was about how I had crossed a line, how I had no compassion, how Kyle had no one else. I stood there listening, letting her pour out every excuse and accusation she had bottled up. And when she was done, I said nothing. I did not argue. I did not yell. I just turned and walked into the bedroom, pulled out my old gym bag, and began to pack. She asked what I was doing. I told her I was leaving. Not for good, at least not yet. But I needed space. I needed to breathe. She scoffed and said, "You are being dramatic." But I was not. I was calm. Too calm, maybe. That is what happens when something inside you finally breaks for the last time. I zipped the bag, grabbed my keys, and walked out the door. I drove across town and stayed at my friend Benny's place that night. He offered me a beer, and we sat in silence for a while. He did not ask questions. He just let me sit there. And for the first time in over a year, I felt a kind of peace. Not happiness, not relief, just quiet. The kind you feel when the noise finally stops. I knew then that something had ended. Maybe not the marriage itself, but something inside it. Something that was not coming back. It was 3 days after I left when my phone rang. I almost did not answer. I was sitting on the couch at Benny's place trying to enjoy the rare quiet when I saw her name flash across the screen. Something in me knew this would be the call that changed everything. I picked it up, and the first thing I heard was sobbing. Tina was crying hard, the kind of cry that makes your words come out in gasps. I stayed quiet, waiting for her to speak. She said Kyle was gone, just disappeared. She told me he had taken her jewelry, pieces her grandmother left her, the ring I gave her on our 5th anniversary, all of it, gone. He had also maxed out her credit card, racking up charges in a different state. She found a note on the kitchen counter, written in his sloppy handwriting. It said, "Thanks for everything, sis." That was it. No goodbye, no explanation. Just those words and an empty space where our peace used to be. She was in shock. She kept saying she never thought he would do something like this, that he had changed, that he had been trying. But the truth had finally caught up to her, and it was uglier than she ever imagined. She begged me to come back, said she needed me, said she could not afford the mortgage on her own, said she was sorry, that she did not mean for things to get so bad, that she should have listened. I sat there on the other end of the line, not saying anything for a moment. Then I took a deep breath and gave her the only truth I had left to give. I said, "Tina, I already left. I just happened to take my peace with me." The line went quiet. She did not know what to say to that, and honestly, there was nothing left to say. I was not angry anymore. I was tired. Tired of being last on her list. Tired of working overtime so someone else could live rent-free. Tired of being the only adult in the house. I gave years of my life trying to make things work, trying to keep us together, trying to understand. But somewhere along the way, she stopped choosing me. Over and over again, she chose Kyle. And when I finally walked away, I did not take revenge. I took peace. That was all I ever wanted. I ended the call with a simple, "Take care of yourself." I meant it. I still loved her, in some distant, bruised kind of way. But love is not enough when respect is gone. I set the phone down and leaned back. Benny walked in with 2 mugs of coffee and handed me one without a word. We sat in silence again, and this time I did not feel broken. I felt like someone who had finally remembered his own worth. It has been 6 months since I walked out that door, and my life has become something I never knew I needed. Quiet. Not the awkward kind of silence that fills a room after a fight, but the peaceful kind that lets you breathe deep and sleep through the night. My apartment is small, but it is mine. No more loud video games blasting at 2 in the morning. No more empty cartons of food left on the counter. No more walking on eggshells in my own home. Just calm, steady quiet. And I have come to treasure every second of it. I still hear bits and pieces about Tina. Word got around that she lost the house. The mortgage fell behind quickly after I left, and without my income holding everything together, it caught up to her fast. She tried to get help from friends and family, but by then, most people knew the full story. Kyle had burned too many bridges, and I guess people were tired of watching her let him keep striking the match. She moved into a small condo across town, or so I heard. We have not spoken since that last phone call, and I think that is for the best. As for Kyle, well, he popped up on social media again a few weeks ago. New name, new city, same scam. A friend sent me a screenshot of a post from someone in another state warning people about a guy who took money and disappeared. I recognized the picture right away. He was smiling, like he always was, when someone else was footing the bill. It made my stomach turn, but only for a moment. Then I turned off my phone and went back to my book, because he is not my problem anymore. And me? I am doing okay. No dramatic changes, no wild success stories, just a man learning how to live again on his own terms. I work, I cook, I take long walks after dinner. I even picked up painting again, something I had not done since college. I have a small circle of friends who check in, and I finally feel like I can be honest when they ask how I am doing. I do not have to pretend anymore. I do not have to carry someone else's weight on my back. I just have to show up for myself, and that has been more healing than I ever expected. What I learned through all of this is simple but hard. Sometimes saving yourself means letting go of the people who refuse to save themselves. You can love someone deeply and still walk away when their choices drown you. That does not make you cold. It makes you human. I thought staying made me strong. But leaving is what finally gave me back my strength and my peace.